Hello, I'm Mara Pearl, and this is Novel Conversations. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to two good friends, both accomplished authors, one in the US, where I am also, and one in New Zealand. And I have paired these two amazing writers because they do both write thrillers, mysteries. We'll sort of tune into the exact genres they are writing. And they also write about small towns, but these towns are near the coast or near a coast, and they are near a major city. So there are some things in common, but I think it will be lots of fun to talk about what's the same and what's quite different about writing in our two different countries, different regions. So first, let me introduce Rebecca Forster. She is a best-selling author, and I'm going to have her brag in a moment about herself. And the other end is Madeleine Eskedahl, whom I got to meet recently in New Zealand, also a marvelous best-selling author. So, do you mind if we have a bit of a brag session? Rebecca, you go first.
Oh, great. I don't know if you were asking me if I minded having a brag session. This is one of the most difficult things for, I think, any creative person to do is to talk about their work. So I'm going to kind of just tell you what makes me truly unique, and that's that I'm the old lady, I'm sure, of this group. I have been writing and publishing for almost 40 years. I made the USA Today bestseller list when readers had to go into bookstores and actually purchase my book. So we're talking before computers, wrote my books on a typewriter, learned the business without the benefit of the internet, and it has been such an incredibly wonderful, wild ride. I am completely blessed. I had a very good career as a traditionally published author. And then I was one of the first adopters who went into the digital books and digital publishing. And that turned out to be sort of my third career. And learning that was incredible, but it was also amazing that suddenly I could reach so many more readers. So, Hostile Witness is the first book of my most popular series, the Witness series. And that book has had over 3 million downloads. So, in my wildest dreams, when I first started writing, and I started writing because someone dared me to do it. So, I unfortunately am not one of those people who have tons of journals, in my closet that when I'm dead, people are going to say, "Oh, wow, look at this." I was dared to write a book. My client was married to Danielle Steele, who I had no idea who she was. And when I made a very flippant remark as to, oh, I bet I could write a book, somebody said, I dare you. And there you go. It is incredible how taking advantage of a door opening or a fun event or challenging yourself can blossom into something that turns into a 40-year career. So I continue to write. I continue to write mostly legal thrillers and police procedurals. Very active in terms of my research. I'm a graduate of the DEA and ATF Citizens Academy, which are the tobacco and firearms law enforcement and the Drug Enforcement Agency. I even landed by tailhook on the USS Nimitz for 2 days, which was pretty cool. I think only, the Top Gun people get to do that, them and me.
Wow.
So, I am having a ball. I hope this comes across to my readers when they read my books that I'm as excited about these books. To me, they're true thrillers because I imagine myself in those situations, and I am forever grateful that the readership is out there and continues to grow, and that we have such active readers who love to communicate too. That's another benefit that I found of this new way of doing it. So that's my brag. I don't have more than that. I think I'm on book 42. And And so that
Wow. Wow.
thank you. Well, that works out to about one a year or so. So we're okay. But I always know how long I've been writing because my oldest son just turned 40 and I was pregnant with him when I started writing. So there you have it. Just the one thing I did learn, never try to write a romance when you're pregnant. Nothing is romantic when you're pregnant. So that's, I guess, why I went into thrillers. So anyway, that's it. Old hand here and lovely to be with you both.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. So, Madeline, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm relatively new to the writing game, really. I've always written in some capacity. I always wrote for, wrote short stories, wrote for my children when they were young. They're now adults. And I think a little bit the same as you. My husband challenged me to say, listen, you need to start because I'd been talking about writing a thriller or a mystery for years and years and years. And I have the notebooks. I have got lots of notebooks, lots of information, lots of newspaper clippings. I collect it all. And he said, for goodness sake, it's time to put your pen to paper and just do it. So I started writing thrillers when my kids were grown. So that's only my first one came out in 2021. So it's fairly recent, although that book took probably 4 years to write because I had really no idea what to do. However, it did quite well once it came out. It debuted on the second spot on the New Zealand top 10 bestsellers list and stayed on there for 2 months. And I've only written two. That's the first one, Blood on Vines. The next one came out 2 years later, and it's called Rings on Water. And the series I write is the Matakana series, which is the area that I live. So Matakana is a wine area just north of our largest city. New Zealand's relatively small compared to the States. So Auckland's only got about 1 million, just over, people living there. And about an hour north is where this wine area is. And it's such a wonderful place to set a series. You have the artisan producers, you have the artists, you have the entrepreneurs, eclectic locals, hardworking folk, but you also have um, lots of weekenders and holiday makers. It's a little bit like parts of this area is a little bit like the Hamptons of New York. So it's where the rich and famous come, not perhaps where we live, but in some parts of it. So you have lots of intrigue, and you got lots of happenings, lots of rumors, lots of secrets. So this makes it absolutely perfect. But second one was also on the bestsellers list. So I was very lucky to have a good readership. And to me, the reader is the most important. And I love doing events. I love talking at libraries. I love doing this kind of thing. It's just to hear the feedback and to listen to what people like and, put that pen to paper and explore so many options. So yeah, that's me. So the third one is nearly out, nearly done. So
Oh,
it's
good.
later.
We're looking
Yes.
forward to it.
I feel like such a newbie compared to you. 42 books.
Oh,
That is and something to strive towards.
yes, yes. And I figure as long as I keep writing, that means I'm still alive and kicking. And so I'll probably, let's see if I can do 40 more. I'll only be 130, I think. I'm not sure.
You can do it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm somewhere in the middle. I have 12 books out in my series, and but I came into the novel writing game from a previous career, and my series is actually based on a radio drama that I created, and it was about a little coastal town in the real town is about 4 hours north of Los Angeles, and I had spent a summer performing there, and I grew up in Tokyo, then I lived in New York and then Los Angeles. So what did I know about a little town? Nothing. So I was just sort of fascinated. And I thought it would make an interesting framework for a story. So the little radio show did well locally, but surprisingly got picked up by the BBC. So then it was a hit on BBC Radio. We had 4.5 million listeners, and that led to interest from publishers. And I always knew that I did want to write novels, but I also felt I hadn't lived enough. I wasn't ready to write them. And it's that lived experience that I think brings the richness that both of you bring to your novels. I've just been delving into book 2 of each of your series. And so I was not exactly in Matakana, but near there recently. And, and I know how beautiful it is. And I am familiar with Rebecca, and I, of course, share a home city. But so I wanted to ask that line between the fictional and the real. Obviously, you're drawing pretty specifically on your region. And so, we take care with those details. So, for example, Madeline, your story is set in the winter. That's hard for me to wrap my mind around because it's July in your story. But you're very good at bringing in that sense of winter, the winter weather, and so forth. I know in the Central Coast, I don't dare say that the bottle brush blooms when it doesn't, because I'm going to have a reader who's going to get in touch and say, no, 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 you're wrong about that. And I don't want that. I don't want anyone thrown out of the story. So Rebecca, this series, and you have 2, but this series is the one that it starts in Hermosa Beach.
Correct. And Hermosa is a little different than the city that inspires Madeline and you. I'm kind of in the middle. Hermosa Beach is just 1.3 miles. It's a very small town. It's very congested, and it is the epitome of Southern California beach city. When I was growing up, this was the place stewardesses lived. Teachers lived during their time off during the summer because it was just so laid back. There was a lot of partying. It's home to the big volleyball tournament, international volleyball tournament. It is a surfing capital. So what you get is a lot of people down there who are just uber laid back. And the reason I loved it is because I had my main character is a woman who is basically making amends. She did something in the courtroom that resulted in the death of 2 children, and she finally realized she doesn't want anything more to do with high profile legal cases. And so she goes to the beach city because she's a beach volleyball player. She just wants to live quietly. And I love the fact that these national and international legal spotlight keeps coming to find her because it is so out of kilter with a beach city. She is the only one that really realizes what's at stake. And there's a wonderful community, but they live their life day to day. They live for the surf coming up. They live for the sun coming up. And here she is suddenly thrown back into this high profile law career that she's so desperately trying to escape. So having Los Angeles this close, as you know, is perfect because she has to go back into the court. Cases like this are not going to be tried in the local courtroom. So I have an easy access to the big city she's trying to escape and the juxtaposition of the beautiful small little town with the gorgeous sunsets and the high waves. And, it's a nice contrast. And the readers always like it because they're like, don't let her go back. And I love it when they get that involved. And I do use places that there was a place called the Mermaid that's just kind of like a dive bar, and it was her bar. And actually, there was a lady who came out and she wrote me and she said, I went to the Mermaid and nobody knows Josie. And I thought, oh my gosh,
really involved.
I love this. Somebody actually thinks she exists. I mean, it was really cool. And so we all have, I mean, it's wonderful. We're all doing thrillers because quite frankly, I don't think there's anything scarier than a small town where you feel safe and suddenly you're not.
Exactly. exactly. And I really get that zing from your books and from Madeleine's. There's an interesting, maybe each of you can speak a moment about pace. I mean, your second novel, Rebecca, just starts off with a bang. I mean, you're like, whoa, it's like a an action adventure movie from the
Thank
beginning.
you.
Yeah, it's exciting. Whereas Madeleine's second novel begins with an almost sort of pastoral feel about it. And so you're drawn in, lulled, let's say, into almost a false sense of security with the beautiful scenery. And then suddenly there's a body on the beach. And so you're like, and so it's just what you said, Rebecca, that it's a place you expected to feel safe, and now suddenly you really can't feel safe. So each of you has handled this in a different way, but delivered, that zing that I'm talking about, that really, draws people in. I started writing down some of the words, Madeleine, that are either used differently or pronounced differently or incomprehensible to an American audience. The one word I found was seconded. Is that right?
Yes,
Secondment,
yes.
which is it's such a great word, makes total sense, and doesn't really exist in English usage, I don't think. Maybe you can correct me, Rebecca, but it means either a second job or it's when you are sort of furloughed, I think we would call it. So you have a detective who's normally in an Auckland office, but then he gets sent to Matakana temporarily. So
That's
that's the secondment, right?
correct. Because in Matakana, the police station is very small. It's a sole charge. We've got Bill Granger, who's the sergeant in charge all year round. But in the summer and certain times of the year, when the population swells tenfold, he needs some backup. So we have Constable Nico Sopoanga, who's a Samoan, a little bit like, muscly, you think The Rock, very handsome Pacific Island, handsome man. So he comes up over the summer and helps out, and that's he's being seconded. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's definitely in the English language, maybe not used in the American setting, but yeah,
We
that's
should adopt it. It's a
it's a
very
good word.
I
sensible
love
word.
finding words like that, though.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know when my husband and I are reading, it's so funny. We always have our phones with us because he'll say, "Have you ever heard of this word?" And immediately it's, "Let's Google it." And so I think as an American reader, not author, but as a reader, I love, as long as it's not so overwhelming that I'm trying to figure out every third word. I adore that when that happens.
Yeah, same here.
So
Larry gives
seconded.
me a word of the day, and so we sort of do a deep dive. And then I keep a running list of words that I think will be perfect somewhere in my stories, and bring them in. I hate the idea of just oversimplifying and
Yeah.
eventually losing certain words that,
Mm,
you want to be able to describe exactly that shade of blue. And
yeah.
if you lose the word cerulean, then maybe you can't. So
Mm.
I'm all in favor of this, richness of language, which both of you have in your wonderful writing.
I think description is really, really important. And it just makes you, land in that scene, land in that city, land in that place, whatever it might be. And for me, setting my books here, I mean, I think the environment is definitely a character because it's got so much to draw on. We've got the contrast of same as you, Rebecca, the proximity to a large city. But when you arrive in this area, it's almost like you're driving through France. It's a beautiful undulating hills and the vineyards on the slopes, but you've also got very, very dense bush or rainforest. You've got the gorgeous beaches, loads of sandy, long, you think Californian beaches, but also lots of rugged coastline. So, I think to conjure that up, you need to really invest some time to bring the reader there. And you were talking about the dive bar. So I use a lot of real life
Yeah.
places, and people say, "Oh, I loved it because we visited 10 years ago," or whatever. Or my sister lives there, and she told me, she goes to that cafe. I am careful though when it comes to places where perhaps something untoward happens. I never use an actual
I don't
place
either.
or
No,
an address. I always make that up because I would hate for people to get upset with me and go, oh, why have you used our house? You know?
I think we have the same sensibility with that because I am really aware. There were two instances where I became sadly overly aware that sometimes people take what you write very seriously and they intrude into your personal life. And so I'm much more cautious now. But I do want to address, Mara, you talked about the different ways we open the book. And I don't know if Madeline thinks this or either of you, but I think it's a very American versus not American thing because I love reading English authors because they lay that groundwork. When I was first with New York, it was literally pounded into me that you have to start off with something shocking. And so, and I'm thinking maybe, after all these years, am I just so trained to do that where I'm thinking, what's the next shocking thing I can create to start this book? And Mara's right. I am very conscious of doing that. But when I read, I love to read the scene setting that brings me in, draws me into the place first. And I think that's, am I wrong? Is that an American thriller thing, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I normally I have a prologue and that's always kind of punchy and it's something you go, wow, I can't wait to find out what
Got
that
it.
is. And then I start my scene building, which, I don't know. I've only written the two books, three nearly, so I don't have huge experience in that field, but that's how I like to read. And I base it on that.
Okay, that's smart.
And I want to make my readers give them the best experience that I can. And being a voracious reader, I've read so much across so many genres. I love just learning and just squirreling things away. And oh, I love the way they've done that part, or how the descriptor of that. Oh, that's just gorgeous, or you just get inspired every day when you read lots of other authors. And I think it's important.
Newspapers,
Reading, yeah.
yeah, magazines. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got stuff everywhere, everywhere. And you'd think I would know what's in it. It's like a treasure chest every time I say, "Oh, I'll look at this pile." And there's always something new in there.
That's right.
I totally agree how important reading is. Each genre has its sort of standard requirements. And then when you know those rules, then I think you have license to bend them or break them on occasion. But I'm somebody who believes in the prologue. And there are some people who don't. There are some people who believe it's really important to start chapter one and dive right into it. And there is no right or wrong answer, I don't think.
I don't
For
think so
me,
either.
yeah, I mean, they both styles work. For me, there's something about the prologue that establishes a sort of a post in the ground. And then from there, I can put a rubber band around it and kind of stretch that rubber band to some other point in the story. And that creates an aha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it might be when you're reading the prologue, and my prologue is almost always about the setting, which, as you said, Madeline, it's very much Milford Haven, my little town, is a character in the series. So it's something about the town, the time of year, the time of day, whatever is going on. But it's sort of like off by itself, because then la la la, we begin chapter one on usually a fairly cheery note that's with my protagonist, Miranda, who's in love with life and she's a painter and, kind of a lovely person. There might be some dark quality to that prologue, but it pays off later when we get that undertow. And again, with the coastal theme, I have part of the storyline is up on the sunny hill, and part of it is underwater and being pulled by the tides, and so I'm just sort of aware of both those aspects that are at play, and very fun because we all happen to write coastal stories, so we get to deal with that kind of rich ongoing metaphor.
There really is something different about people who live on coasts, people, who long to visit on coasts, it's just amazing. I don't hear people speak the same way about I'm going to a river or lake as I do, when people say, oh, you're so lucky to live near the ocean, or I've always wanted to see it. And it's just this visceral thing in so many people. I don't know, it's a character of its own. When I love when the ocean is just crazy roiling. That's my favorite. Other people adore it when it's just calm and beautiful and, the sun shines on it. And that's what I love about all our books. If we didn't have the shading of happy and threatening and, dark days and sun coming out, our books would be boring. It's like the readers need to have us take them on the ride you're talking about, Mara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the most wonderful aspects of being an author, and what are some of the most difficult?
I'm gonna let Madeline go on that one.
I think it's probably the freedom to explore and research and study and just write whatever you're passionate about. I think you need to have a passion. Otherwise, if you're writing something that might be in vogue at the moment, so it might be a certain style of book, and you want to hitch your wagon to that, and you think, oh, I'm going to try and just replicate that. If your heart isn't in it, I don't think people are going to enjoy it. So I
Totally
think
agree.
you got to have the passion. I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to do this, and I'm so enjoying all aspects of it. Although I must say, research is rather fun. I actually went to Appleton in Wisconsin 2 years ago to attend a writers' police academy. Have you been, Rebecca?
Yes, I've been to those. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not the Writers Police Academy. I've been to police. I've
Right.
been to the police, right? Not a writer's one.
And I mean that was amazing. And I mean there's such big differences between maybe American society and New Zealand society, because we are very, very relaxed and laid back here. The police don't carry sidearms, for example. It's a completely
Amazing.
different kettle of fish. But I learned so much. And, it was just, I think the best thing was, apart from, going through and getting to experience the crime scenes and the shooting range and all of the aspects, it was the people meeting. I met some amazing thriller and mystery writers. And I think that it's the people that make us, help our journey move forward. It's really, really important. But yeah, no. So another thing I went to was a forensic conference here. I don't know. I sort of happened up on it. It wasn't something that I'd seen advertised. And my husband said, "Oh my gosh, there's this conference. You should go." Wonderful, because the contacts that you make, and you talked about, how much creative license we use and things. I think you've got to be quite careful to get things relatively correct procedurally. Obviously, you can't get everything in time frame, but you have to write in a way it makes it believable, so the reader invests in you, because there's so many TV shows and so many books that are so that they're sort of tottering in on their high heels in the crime scenes, and that's not at all what happens. And
My favorite things.
I know, and I'm sure you've got the same. I've got a retired police sergeant that reads through all of my manuscripts and gives me feedback to make sure that I'm actually hitting the right beats. That this is.
Actually, I don't have that, so I desperately need your retired sergeant.
He's lovely.
No, I come a little differently, but I think it's exactly the same thing, which is both of us are fascinated. I've always been a legal voyeur, a justice voyeur. I've always had such amazing respect for police and FBI and anyone who I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't have the mind for it. I really didn't. I could never defend someone I knew was guilty. So I do it in the pages of a book, what I think. But I'm very lucky in that my husband's a judge. He has handled a number of high profile cases. So I know what that's like. Before he was a judge, he was a federal prosecutor specializing in organized crime and terrorism. And so I'm very lucky to have a wonderful community of, FBI agents, cops, whatever. Unfortunately, they're all getting old, so they've retired. But I have lovely access to the courts. And I think that what's weird for me, what's so great is that because I've lived with my husband for so long and watched his career and really paid attention to it, I know the questions to ask that will make the book believable.
Mm.
So yeah, so as opposed to just saying, oh, to somebody, I have a crime scene and this is it, what do I do? I can write to that specific point and say, here's the outcome I want. Is it plausible? And how would it play out? And I think that's just simply a difference of our years, my years of doing this, plus the fact that I just happen to have in-house research. I mean, how does it get better than that? It's great.
That's awesome. So I have a story I can share, and it isn't about a law enforcement research resource, though I have people in the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department who have always helped me, and I have a sheriff character. But this story is about commercial diving. I have a character who had to do commercial diving, which is a very serious business. It's deep diving with umbilical cord and special equipment and walking on the ocean floor in service of an oil rig. Well, this is well outside my lived experience, let's say. So I did do a lot of reading, I did do a lot of research, and then I asked to meet the head of the school of commercial diving, which the largest school for this happens to be in Santa Barbara, which is within the California Central Coast that I write about. So I called and spoke to his secretary, and I had to jump through quite a number of hoops before he would agree to meet with me. So finally he did, and then the instructions to get there were almost a test. In other words, I want you to turn left where it says do not enter, and then park where you're not supposed to park, etc. So I followed, I wrote everything down. I followed exactly what he said. And then to get to his office, I actually had to climb a ladder. And so by the time I arrived at this office, I felt like I'd been well tested. And I did bring a copy of one of my previous books with me. And I handed it to him and I thanked him for meeting with me. And he said, so you really are an author. All right, I'll talk to you. So I don't know what experience he may have had previously with somebody claiming,
Don't
but
you? I think that's absolutely spot on. That nobody believes you do this. Nobody.
And what's so great is then I said, so would this character wear a Kirby band mask? And he's like, all right, you have done some homework. Now I will show you, and he took me to a special place where there are all these different kinds of headgear and masks, which he wasn't about to waste his time showing me if I didn't already have some information.
Did you get to
So,
put them on?
yes.
Oh,
And I don't
cool.
know how anybody, I mean, they're so heavy. I don't know how anybody manages. Anyway, it was very interesting. And Madeline, you said you love the research. Oh my gosh. I can go down that rabbit hole. And I
I
finally
know.
have to say, okay, Pearl,
Yeah.
it's time you actually write the chapter, But it is so interesting how much we learn. And then I don't want to dump too much technical information within the story, but enough so that somebody who does work on an offshore oil rig can say, yeah, this is how it is. So is there something particularly difficult about being an author that you wish you didn't have to do?
That's tough. I find it actually hard to write. I love the research. I love editing, but
Oh,
the beginning, when you're staring at a screen and 300 or 400 pages have to come out. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't do an outline. Usually I keep it all in my head. So yeah, I know the beginning, I know the end, and then the middle, and I keep thinking, oh, I'll never get this done. It's horrible. I can't do it. I think that second guessing is always the worst, absolutely the worst. But I love to edit. It's just very hard to actually do that first draft for me.
I think for me, when I have to start a new book, I think, what in the world makes me think I can write a book? I can't write a book. That's ridiculous. So for that reason, I have this wall that I call my gratitude wall, and it has like framed awards and it has, framed book covers. And I look at that for a moment and I go, okay, I think I did that. Therefore, I must be able to do this.
Again.
And I think it's surprising. I bet you most authors go through something like that. It's hard. It's hard work.
I think it's super tough. I think we can be very self-critical, even though you might have done really well with the previous book and you've had lots of wonderful feedback and people can't wait for the next book and everything's exciting. I'm also a discovery writer, so I love that first draft. So you sit down and you just get the first draft and you go, oh, this is going to be great. Then you read through it and go, oh, I don't like editing. I really don't like editing. That's when I drag my chain, and I have got so many interests and so many other things to do. So I really have to tell myself to sit down, you need to do this. And if I have something like editing, I normally get up early in the morning because, I just know the house is quiet. I can get a couple of hours in. If I get a couple of solid hours, I'm happy. But yeah,
I can't work at home at all. Mara, do
oh,
you work at home?
I do.
You
Yeah.
do.
I do work at home, but I also, like you, I work in cafes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're locked. Yeah.
I have to be out by 6:30 and sitting at a table in the coffee shop, and there is no way I could work at home. I'm admiring that you can. I'd always want to be cleaning the bathrooms or cooking dinner or something.
that's the problem. That's the problem because
It's a
there's so
problem.
much else to do, right? But
Yes.
Exactly.
I just think being out in a cafe is too distracting for me. It's lovely, we all think that or everyone thinks that writers sit sipping wine or sipping coffee, admiring the countryside, letting the inspiration wash over us. It's not quite like that. I just feel the first draft is the best, not perhaps quality wise, but it's the most fun, I think. And then obviously as you polish and, I tend to also put it in the drawer for a while and just, leave it for at least 4 or 5 weeks.
Oh,
And then you go, oh, it's not quite as bad as I thought. Or I can work with this because you can't edit a blank page, right? So you need to have words. I'm not precious with words. I don't mind, cutting and, exploring other avenues. And I think the problem with being a discovery writer, even though it's the only way I can write, is that sometimes you write yourself into a corner and then you've got
yes.
to untangle.
I have done
Um,
that. Yes.
yeah, but
Okay,
What
so a discovery writer, I think in American parlance, we would say you're either an outliner or you're a pantser.
hamster?
And
Yes,
a,
a
and a,
hamster.
a pantser is somebody who writes from the seat of their pants.
Right.
that's right. I'm a pantser.
Yeah.
But I guess at some point, you get to that saggy middle and you go, I
Oh,
need to sit and just then I actually have a large piece of paper and I just brainstorm. And that's how I get to the end because I really have got no idea where the
I'll just
story
go
is
out and
going.
do something physical. And it's funny how, like, I'll go play tennis or I'll go walking or I'll clean out closets or anything physical. And my brain goes completely blank. And then after enough time, it's like that saggy middle just pops into it. I could never do what you do, which is brainstorm with myself. So I must be brainstorming on some level, but I need to actually be physically active. Maybe it's because we sit so much that I've got to get out and do something else.
Makes sense. For me, the novels began as adaptations of an existing show. So it kind of has always been like a jigsaw puzzle. So I know what the arc of a particular character is, but I don't know at first how it will be braided together.
Yeah.
And also, if I get an inspiration for a particular scene, no matter where it's going to occur, I write that scene. And then I have to plug it in later. So I've sort of developed a system of colored uh, Post-it notes. They used to only come in yellow, and then they started coming in like a zillion colors, and I now have stacks of these, and each color is a particular character.
Oh, that's smart.
So I write down just enough for me to remember what's going to occur in that moment. And then I have this big sort of poster board thing where I start playing with the order of things, and eventually the order of it settles. So it's a strange process, but when I was writing the drama, I had to write a show a week. So it was a very, very, heavy schedule. And I did manage once to have one character in two places at the same time. So that's
Sure.
when I realized, I've got to create a system where I can, avoid that.
Yeah, I was editing today and a very old book. I wanted to see if it was worth salvaging, and the character had put out a cigarette 3 times in the same scene. It's like that is a good trick. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all been there,
Yeah.
but we don't see it. So that's why it's so important that other people read through it, and
Oh, yes.
perhaps a developmental editor that
I
goes,
have a wonderful editor, but she's mean. She's just like, what is wrong with you?
yeah. I think it pays to have a straight talking editor.
I
And
agree.
because you don't want it candy coated, you want the product to be the best that it can possibly be. And yeah,
But she
it's
wastes no
good.
time either. Yeah. So there's no time. If it's horrible, she's just like, it's horrible. If it's good, this is good. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. After 20 years, I don't think I could have a career without her.
I lean on my editor very much, really value her input. She's always honest. So, I mean, she's a nice person, but if something's wrong, she will tell me. So it's important to have somebody trustworthy,
I
you
think
know.
it's critical.
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely critical.
Yeah. So now would you say are your books plot driven or character driven?
And they
definitely
do
plot.
both.
Could be both.
Both? Did you say both, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Okay.
A
And
bit-
Madeline,
Mine
you
are
said
very
plot?
plot driven, but people love the characters, so it's hard to
Yeah.
say.
I think mine are a bit, definitely plot driven, because mine are normally set over a week or 10 days. Well, the two books, about a week or 10 days sort of duration. Don't know why. It just happens, and it's an organic process. And I think I write quite short chapters, which has been compared to a Netflix type series, how we like to read, how we like to watch. I think we're quite impatient, everything is instant. So
Yep.
we want things to happen quickly. And I think it wasn't deliberate. I didn't plan that out. It was completely perhaps how I like to read or how I like to watch streaming services. And I think the plot is definitely, you want the plot to move the story along at a pace. But I also agree with you, Rebecca. I think I love my characters, even the ones that aren't perhaps the best, personalities. I love them. And I think the readers do as well. And I'm really enjoying developing them and seeing them grow. So I think it's probably a mixture of both. Yeah.
I think for me, the story always comes from the character.
Oh,
But
yes.
I've been living with these characters for many years now.
Mm.
And so I know what they would do and what they would not do. And it's fun to watch them wrestle with whatever challenges come along. There are some who are morally courageous, and some who are deniers and avoiders. And to watch circumstances start to heap up because they haven't been dealing with things, and then that turns out to be the plot. But it came from the characters.
Mm.
But there's no wrong answer about this again, and it's somewhere on a spectrum
Mm.
with character over here, plot over here,
I
and
agree.
trying to weave it plausibly and also keep the pace. That is important. Yeah, as you both mentioned, the saggy middle. We don't want that.
Well, my characters are a little odd in that they really took over the series. This series is odd because initially it was supposed to be one book for Penguin Putnam. Then they came back and said, let's make it three, which I'd never done before. And it wasn't until I went digital that it really exploded and people wanted more. And so I hadn't had a plan for these characters. I had no idea. And so secondary characters, because of the plot, suddenly became incredibly important and were primary. And it's like yeast. It's been so organic and strange.
Yes.
And I think the more people like our series and demand of us to what happens next, if it's like, which I love the Reacher books, but I don't think I could do 20 books centered on my original main character. The other characters are taking over, giving her a little breathing time, fleshing themselves out. And I kind of like that this whole, community, I can't say that one is really the main character anymore, which I
An
love.
ensemble cast. I love it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like it. Yeah, ready for Netflix. I think we should call Netflix, all of us.
Let's
Hey,
do.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
We're
right.
ready.
You take care of that, Mara.
So, are there particular cultural elements that you are careful to bring into your stories? Like Madeline, you mentioned a Samoan character. Now, let me ask you, is Samoan synonymous with Maori or not necessarily?
No, Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. So you got to be mindful how you use language and custom and all of that. But I mean, I think it makes the fabric the more richer if you do have I mean, we live in a multicultural society. Auckland's the largest Pacific city in the world. I find it really interesting. So we're not so linear and it's just about a certain type of person. Um, it's real life. I mean, when I write, as being Swedish, I probably take a lot of inspiration from the Scandinavian writers, and a lot of I don't know if you've read a lot of those books, but it's very everyday life. So characters, whatever they're going through in their family life, their work life, the dramas with teenage children, whatever it may be, as well as these happenings in the books that are, maybe the criminal elements. Um, I like the everyday, and I think we can so relate to that, or readers can so relate to that. It's not super glitzy or glam. It's actually everyday things that we all go through. And I that's the feedback I've heard that's what people like. So it's ordinary people, you know, living their life and then these things happen.
Right,
Yeah,
right, exactly.
exactly.
And
And so, yeah, and Rebecca and I are in certainly a multicultural city
Yep.
mm,
as well. And I know that's certainly a part of your stories.
mm,
Yeah, I use different cultures and ethnicities
mm,
as they're appropriate. If the story calls for it, it calls for it. I have never, and one of the reasons I guess is one of the main characters, Hannah, she's multiracial. So she already started out as, I mean, 16 years old and sort of half identifying Black, Indian, nobody really knows. So
mm,
she's there, and it's been an interesting thread throughout all the books. her ethnicity, but I try to use a light hand and write in the same way that in my own life, I come in contact with different people from different places. I guess the biggest one was Albania. I did a book set with Albanian characters because that's sort of our adopted country. Our son was there in the Peace Corps for many years and lived there 10 years after. And we love it so much. And it has an unusual legal system, ancient legal system. And so when I wrote about that, I was very careful not to, do something that might insult someone. And that was the only time I really thought about it. Other than that, as the characters come in and go out, they just are. They just are what they are because the beach is the beach. The culture is the beach. And everyone who's there, it doesn't matter what color you are, where you came from, you're there because you're at the beach. And so that's the overriding culture.
Sort of a melting pot of its own.
Mhm.
For me, my sheriff character is Black. And these stories originally were set in the late 90s. And at that time, it was unusual to have somebody, African American, serving in the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Department.
Oh, yeah.
So it kind of gave me a chance to write about the particular tensions that come up for him that wouldn't come up for a white officer. And then some fun synchronistic things. I have a very favorite musician named Keb Mo, who's a blues musician. And so I have my character loving that musician. And I also have my character having gone to school at Compton High. And Compton
Wow.
is a really interesting area of Los Angeles that at one time was gorgeous mansions owned mostly by African American people. And then there were terrible riots and the area kind of got ruined and the school went downhill. Now there are so many famous athletes, actors who went to Compton High that they have refunded their school and it's been rebuilt. So anyway, I'm doing some research about Keb Mo, and he went to Compton High.
Oh,
And it was
interesting.
just, I couldn't have planned it better. It's another one of those sort of benefits of doing the research and also working to bring an authenticity. And I can say from what I've read of both your work so far, that's the main thing that I get. It's like, yes, that's what the LA region is like. I
Well, actually,
recognize it. And I feel that with my small exposure to New Zealand, I get that from your work too, Madeleine. It's just wonderful because I get to go there because of your writing.
I'm thinking to my other series about using different cultures because that one I write about the micro communities of Los Angeles, not the beach towns. And those micro communities are really immigrant communities. So like little Ethiopia. And right next to Compton, where you're talking about, is Richland Farms, which is an actual farm where mostly Hispanics farm in the middle of Los Angeles. The land was ceded by Compton, who started the city of Compton. It's amazing how all this stuff just comes together. I mean, I love what we do.
We're never going to run out of subject matter,
No,
are we?
no.
I want to talk for a moment about your audiobooks, as you both have, wonderful audios. So do you like them and do you like the narrators? Did you choose your narrators or how did that start for you?
Yes, I got to choose the narrator. They send, I don't know, 5 or 6 different samples, and I really like this one particular one, and
It's
he's
very
going to
good.
come through with my series. So no, very thrilled with that. Yeah.
It was interesting to me that there are multiple accents in use in your audio. I mean, as I hear it anyway, I don't hear him with a New Zealand accent in his narration. But when he goes into characters, then that accent is there. Is that his design or what you chose or?
No. So he's I think he's quite experienced, this
Oh,
lovely
yes, I'm
gentleman.
sure. He's very good.
And no, he is a New Zealander. But, I got I got some Americans, I got some British narrators, and I thought, no, I need someone who can pronounce the place names and the colloquialisms, and not that there is a lot of that, but it's a slight sprinkling throughout. And I think to get that flavor, you need someone who can pronounce it with a natural flair. And no, he's done a great job.
And he's good at his American accent too,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
with that
uh,
character.
yes,
Fun,
yes,
very fun. I mean,
yeah.
I've been enjoying it. And so with your series, you have this sort of dynamic woman.
Yeah, this is a tough topic for me because I chose her not really knowing what I was doing. I don't listen to audiobooks, and so Tantor is the producer, and they bought the rights to this series, and so I hope it's okay. I sometimes take a peek at the reviews because I really just don't know what makes a good audiobook. I don't know if people like multiple voices, some I've heard some authors do that where you have multiple actors. I I really don't know. So this is one area where I have to defer to the people who know what they're doing. I've never actually listened to one of mine all the way through. I just can't do it. It must be like being an actress and not being able to
I
watch
understand.
yourself.
Well, so I have a lot of experience with audio. And the classic approach to an audiobook is a single reader. And the most important thing is that the audience can tell who's speaking. So whatever it takes for the audience not to be confused. So that's why you want somebody who's quite competent at having a neutral kind of narrator voice, and then can do men, can do women, can do juveniles, can do visiting Americans or whomever, so that the person just stays in the flow of the story.
Okay, so I tried to listen, and her interpretation of my main character was so jarring to me. I couldn't listen anymore. So I don't even know who decides that? Who decides is that the voiceover who actually
Well, it's
decides
the
that?
producer who
It
finally,
is. Okay.
will make choices. But my problem, if it's a problem, is that I came from radio drama, which is the opposite of an audiobook, right? Because
That's true.
every voice is articulated by a different actor. And then every sound is articulated as well. And you have the near sound. So if you have a dinner scene, you have the cutlery hitting the plates and so forth. But then you have the distant sound, which might be the tide coming in or cars on a freeway. And you have to layer the sound. And I worked with and still work with a fabulous engineer whom I call Engineer Bill. And we've worked together for 40 years and done, hundreds of episodes. And it's really, really fun. And it's a sort of mental movie. And
Mm.
so if there's some sound that's missing, we can generally identify that and correct it. And then we have original soundtrack music that goes between scenes and so forth. So when it came to, it's like, okay, well, obviously we are audio people, therefore we will produce Mara's audiobooks. But then, oh, how are we going to do this? Is it going to be a hybrid, with a little touch of audio drama, or is it going to be a straight read? And for the most part, it's a straight read. So, that's me using my acting training to do different characters. And I have been hired to narrate other people's novels. I remember for one mystery, I had to play four different cowboys. And
Wow.
that was a challenge. But I think audio is very rich. And there are some producers these days who, as you mentioned, will use more than one actor, sometimes only two. So you might have a man do the male characters and a female do the female
That
characters,
makes sense to
something
me.
like that.
I
It
have
does.
tried the AI, which is interesting, because it was available and it was free, and it's fascinating what they're doing. It's terrifying, actually.
terrifying from mostly my
It
perspective.
really is.
But yeah, but it is interesting. But at least now with the Screen Actors Guild in the US, as an actor, you can give your permission for AI to use your voice, or you can deny permission.
Oh,
So
interesting.
at least the actor has, that was one of the big things in the last strike that got established.
Too bad authors can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, Authors Guild is working on lots of good things.
Yes, they are.
They really are. We have an organization, Madeleine, called the Authors Guild, and it's really great. And they have taken on legally all kinds of entities who continue to try to sort of scrape our work without payment and without acknowledgement. So we're grateful.
We've got the same battle going on here.
I'm sure. So where can people find your wonderful books?
They can find mine on Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble. All my books are wide. They will not find them in bookstores because I did make that decision not to traditionally publish any longer, so I can control my work. But they're available in audio and print and digital. And in fact, I'm thrilled that Madeleine, your part of the world has been so kind to me, and I have a great readership over there. So it's always thrilling. For some reason, Canada doesn't like me, but you guys do. I don't know why. I know it's weird. UK, Australia, New Zealand, but Canada, man, I cannot break Canada. So yeah, I'm all over the place and very easy to find.
I'm the same, all over the place. Obviously, all the online bookstores and physical bookstores in New Zealand. But and obviously, you can order if you want a paperback. You can order that from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of those. But yeah, if you just Google me, I'm everywhere.
Excellent.
I love that we show up in Google. I always get such a charge out of that. It's like, oh my God.
One thing to mention, we were talking about real places, and I have started a custom of inviting readers to some of the real places that show up in my books in every autumn. And this coming autumn, it'll be a slightly bigger deal because I'm hitting some milestones that I shall not mention, but you're invited. And these are such fun events. There is a beautiful lighthouse. I have a lighthouse in each of my books. There's only one on the Central Coast that has an interior space where one can gather. So we're going to have a tasting, and the Central Coast is perhaps as well known as the Matakana area for wineries. So we'll have a sort of a wine and cheese thing in the library in time for the sunset over this beautiful bay. And then, there's a brunch at a diner that's part of my series, and some other fun things. And so in mid-October, if you want to come to the Central Coast, we certainly.
Sounds amazing.
That does. That really does.
Well, it would be
You're
fun.
a master of all this, Mara. You really are.
Oh, well, it would be so fun, Madeleine, if we can ever do an event in person.
Yes.
In the States or in New Zealand. I think that you wouldn't have to twist Rebecca's or my arms too far to get us to come.
I'd be very keen, and you're both very, very welcome to come down under. It's a great place.
Yes, it is. It is
one of these days. I'm jealous that you've been there, Mara. I really am. I just was in Vietnam with a number of New Zealanders, and they were amazing. Absolutely love them.
It's good. Well, of course, while I was there, I did a lot of research, so I will be writing a book that's set there, which is.
I'm looking forward to that.
Fun. Yeah. Well, I'm going to need your help to, be one of my early readers and tell me where I went wrong.
Anytime. That would be fine.
I was going to say, and I'm always lending my husband out if you need anything about the judicial system in the United States. So there you have it.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so very much for joining me today. It's just been such a pleasure, and I'm going to be continuing to enjoy both your wonderful novel series and look forward to seeing you soon again.